Here for the panel. Yeah, great. We'll have all the discussions after the talks. That was fantastic. Thank you, Mike. And my apologies to Dr. Hussein Kamal for not introducing our co-chairman this morning. So I'd like to invite Dr. Kossayer up to talk to us about neck sealing is not enough, the forgotten importance of iliac landing zones.
Good morning, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Mahmoud Salah for the invitations, Dr. Sakar for the invitations. I'm going to speak about neck sealing is not enough, the forgotten importance of iliac landing. We know the EVAR success depend on proximal and distal landing zone, and both events are linked to the seal complication. Any changes in the seal complication increase your morbidity and treatment failure. And the proximal sealing zone always being the primary focus of interest in the EVAR, although distal landing zone remodeling also impact the EVAR durability. For this reason, just focusing on the proximal sealing zone is not enough, and distal zone has to get, we have to focus on it so to get a good outcome after EVAR. For proximal sealing zone, we know the major problem is the neck dilatation after EVAR placement. It's happened about 23%. The reason using self-expandable stent in the devices and oversizing, we can exert a continuous outward force on the aortic wall. And this can lead to worse clinical outcome by increasing type 1 endoleak migration and reintervention. And the risk factor for the neck dilatation in the proximal neck is to use if you use EVAR in the neck diameter more than 29, suprarenal fixation oversizing more than 20%, neck angulation more than 60%, neck length then less than 10 millimeter, presence of mural thrombus or calcification more than 50%, and device type. So certain endograft, especially the one with the lower radial force, has less chance of neck dilatation proximally. So this is what we know about neck dilatations. But what about distal landing zone? We know that the iliac sealing zone, it's dynamic, it's not statics after EVAR. And the iliac artery continue to dilate after the EVAR, and sometimes also limb retraction is very common. Iliac dilatation usually happen immediately after we put an EVAR and progressive over the time. And usually more pronounced if we use a large iliac diameter or oversizing. It does not always cause complication, but increase the risk of the complication and compromising the distal landing zone. Whereas endograft limb retraction associated with the iliac dilatation increase the risk of iliac sealing loss, and more common with if you use a bell bottom limb more than 24. So what are the risk factors for the iliac seal complication after the EVAR? The main risk factor is the long follow-up. So the longer we follow up the patient, we can to find these iliac dilatations, especially after many years. So the longer you follow up the patient, you see it. Larger preoperative AAA diameter, it major problems. Shorter iliac sealing zone, severe iliac tortuosity, and inadequate oversizing, and endograft limb retractions. This is a very nice paper. They look at the dynamic of the iliac artery after EVAR placement. And this is the method to use it for serial links and diameter measurement at the iliac sealing zone. So they measure the iliac at the area of, you put the EVAR distally, the distance between the EVAR and iliac bifurcations, and they follow up this patient preoperative and after the procedure. And they found that the dilatation of the iliac artery more than 20% happen about 50% of the cases, which is very large. But the dilatation to exceed the graft diameter happen in about 28%, which is still a large number. The risk factor is again the long follow-up and oversize more than 20% in the iliac arteries. Limb retraction more than 5 millimeter occur in about 9% of the cases, and again associated with the iliac seal complications. And the risk factor are the limb endograft diameter more than 24 and iliac artery dilatation beyond the graft. What about seal complications? They found the seal complication happen about 5.7%, but type 1B endoleak happen only 2.7%. The independent predictor was limb retraction, larger baseline AAA, and short iliac sealing zone. So what the recommendation that you need to maximize your iliac sealing zone links. Try to get your EVAR as close as possible to the iliac bifurcations. If you're doing an EVAR for larger aneurysm, more than 65, you have to pay attention, especially if you use a limb more larger than 24 millimeter in the iliac artery. Consider extension to the external iliac artery if your receding zone less than 15 millimeters. Oversize more than 15% is recommended, but excessive oversizing more than 20% can end with with the limb occlusions. And long-term follow-up surveillance is very important because, as we said before, the longer follow-up you're going to see this dilatation at the level of the iliac artery. There's another paper. They look at the incidence and risk factor and progressive impact of type 1B endoleak following EVAR, and they found the incidence about 0 to 8%. A majority happen after 6 months post-EVAR. Risk factor was common iliac diameter more than 18 millimeters. If you use a flare limb more than 20 millimeters, if you have a short iliac seeding zone less than 20 millimeters, severe iliac tortuosity, a large AAA more than 65 millimeter, or longer aneurysm sac more than 107 millimeters. And the last thing, if you do inadequate oversizing less than 10%, you can end with type 1B endoleak. Was the treatment good success? Usually we can treat type 1 endoleak in about 100% endovascular. Either you can extend your graft to the external iliac artery and just go and coil the internal iliac artery, or you can use an IBD from Gore or Coke or any other devices, or if you don't have access, you can do a sandwich technique. Really open conversion is very rare, but the most important, if the patient refuse intervention and he still have type 1B endoleak, this patient has to be followed up very carefully because it's high risk of ruptures. So conclusions, iliac seeding zone is dynamic, it's not static, and require long-term surveillance. Progressive iliac dilatation and retraction are strongly tied to the iliac anatomy and landing zone characteristic, leading to the loss of distal seal and type 1B endoleak. Avoid bell bottom limb when possible, especially if more than 24. Maximize your distal landing zone during EVAR. Try to go as close as possible to the iliac bifurcation. And finally, if you get type 1 endoleak, the treatment most of the time is endovascular with a very success outcome. Thank you very much for your attention.